Hi, everybody. My name's Lisa Percivault, and tonight I just had the most wonderful time. I had an opportunity to visit a cancer support group. They meet at Wesley United Methodist Church in Selinsgrove on the third Thursday of every month. And tonight I had the opportunity to share my journey of hope with them. And so they asked me to record the speech. And so that's what I'm doing here. So I'm the daughter of Laverne and Ethel Eisworth. I'm the mom of Alex. I'm the sister of Cherie. I'm the aunt of Miranda and Lucy and Lacey, the niece of many, a cousin of many, and a friend of many. And I know how it feels to be diagnosed with cancer. And I also know that it didn't just affect me, but it affected everyone around me. And I've learned also that going through cancer, that everyone has their own story. And for me, my story of hope is deeply rooted in my Christian faith. So in February of 2018, I was working to finish my MBA. It was something that I had been working on for over 2 years. And suddenly, some things were happening in my body that I knew shouldn't be happening. And it led me to get medical attention. And for months, I waited for tests, and the symptoms just kept getting worse. Finally, on June 6th, 2018, a day that I will never forget, I had a doctor's appointment. And I had offers at the time from my mom and my dad and my sister to go with me on the appointment, and I refused them all. I told them I'll be fine. It's not a big deal. I'll be in and out. And I don't know why I was refusing their help at the time, but I do know now, and I know that that's the way that it was supposed to be. So at the doctor's appointment, they called my name, and after I met with the nurse, she said, "The doctor will be with you shortly." And I waited and waited and waited, and I thought, where is this man? And after 45 minutes, I had a thought cross my mind. I was thinking, I wonder how many people that this doctor had to deliver tough news to today, never thinking that I would be one of them. And then I kind of laughed at myself because I remember thinking, you know what, I guess I'll forgive him for being so late. You see, my 20-year-old self would have wanted to send him a bill in the mail for my time, but my 42-year-old self at the time had the ability to extend a little bit of grace for his tardiness. So, moments after I had that thought, the doctor appeared with the nurse, and he started the examination. And in less than 2 minutes, he said, "I found the problem." And I said, "Oh, thank God." And then he came to my bedside, and he paused. And he said, "You have cancer, my dear, and it's pretty far along." It was something that I had never expected to hear. And he continued to speak, but I couldn't make out the words that he was saying. He kind of sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. And the whole room seemed to be spinning, and I was still. And then he proceeded to do a biopsy. And I just laid on the table, just trying to make sense of everything that he had just told me. And the tears began to roll down my face. And I asked the nurse to please just hold my hand. Because although there were 2 other people in the room, I had never felt so alone. And when they left, that feeling just multiplied. I thought to myself, why did I tell my entire family that I'd be okay at this appointment by myself? I'm not okay. How did this happen to me? I run half marathons. I drink smoothies. I eat an abundance of vegetables. I work out at the gym. Why? Oh my goodness. What if I die? I'm not ready to die. I had a million thoughts cross my mind. And so when the appointment was done, the nurse asked me if there was anyone that she could call for me to come pick me up. And I said, no, thank you. I'll be fine. And then she told me not to drive for a little while. She said maybe to just sit there for 30 minutes or so until I felt ready. And so in a daze, I walked out to my car thinking to myself, how am I going to tell my family? How am I going to tell my son? And then I sat there in my car by myself when suddenly, and I love sharing this, I felt something like I had never felt before, and it was the presence of the Lord. And I felt him so strongly that I looked in my rearview mirror, and I looked in my back seat, and I looked beside me, and I looked around the car to see if he was there. And I couldn't see him, but I know that he was. And I do believe that God speaks through people, and I believe that he spoke through that nurse. And what she was really saying to me was, listen, I know you were just hit with some really tough news. And before you just get in your car and take off, you just need to Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. And so, in the stillness, I felt his presence, and I knew he had me. And out loud, I had a conversation with him, and I told him, I've been running from you, and he said, I know. It wasn't an audible voice. It was a spirit voice that I could hear. And I said, I'm sorry. And again, he said, I know. I've been with you the whole time. And in my mind, I was going through all of the things that he had been there for, that I had never taken the time to notice. You see, I didn't go to church at that point in my life. I was a skeptic sometimes, and a believer at other times. I had all of these misconceptions about church, but on that day, June 6th, 2018, I was so convinced that I wasn't alone, that it led me back to church, where I began to learn all about God's promises in the Bible, one being that we are never alone. Even when our family or our friends can't physically be there, we are never alone. And at the time I didn't know it, but I do know now that God placed me there in the doctor's office, alone, on one of the most challenging days of my life, so that I would know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he is always there. Just as Matthew attested in chapter 28, verse 20, and behold, I am with you always to the end of age. So, after a cancer diagnosis, I know how easy it is to fall into a trap. It's easy to ask yourself, or even to ask God, why me? If you love me, why would you let this happen to me? Don't you see that I'm suffering? The nausea, the burn marks, the bone pain, the neuropathy, the loss of bodily functions. Why would you allow me to feel such physical pain? And don't you know that my family needs me here? The list goes on. And the treatments are hard. In 6 months, I had 9 rounds of chemotherapy 28 external radiation therapies, and 4 internal radiation therapies. And most days, the side effects were more than I could take. And I learned that the devil likes to get us into a place where we question God. Throughout Scripture, he was there to tempt Jesus himself. So of course, he's going to be there to try to tempt all of us. And I know that the reason that I didn't fall for it was because I know I wasn't alone that day in my car. And I know because of that day that I'm never alone. And because of the testimonies in the Bible, I know I'm never alone. Have you ever heard of the song Waymaker? The lyrics are powerful. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. I know that he is all of those things. And I'm going to go over them one by one, so get ready. And I'll start with Waymaker. 3 months before I was diagnosed, my mom was offered an early retirement at the company where she was employed for over 38 years. And she took it. So suddenly she had all of this free time, and it was no accident, because the Lord knew that he had a very important calling for her, and she rose to the occasion. I remember the first few weeks of my treatments. I thought my mom was coming up to spend a couple of days with me, and she showed up with a large suitcase and another large bag. And my head was in such a daze at that point. People kept asking me, "What do you need?" And I didn't know. I didn't know. But I know as soon as I saw my mom with all of her life belongings in my driveway, I knew that I'd need her. You see, God made a way for me to get back and forth to my treatments, my daily treatments, which were a 4-hour round trip each Monday through Friday. I also had girlfriends, Kelly and Beth, who have families and careers of their own. And they dropped everything to come stay with me, to give my mom a break, even though she didn't want one. My sister joined me for treatments and tests. My Aunt Mary, my son saved me from an allergic reaction to the chemo one time. And of course, my dad. My dad also called me every day. He was working at the time, and he was there when he could be, but he called me every day. And it's no accident that one of my dad's gifts from the Lord is that he knows how to serve the sick and the hurting. It's been well over hundreds of times, and I'm not exaggerating, where I've called my dad and said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And he's either told me that he's going to see someone in the hospital, going to a funeral, or writing out a card to send to somebody in the mail. And he's also a cancer survivor, so he shared his wisdom with me. God made a way, again, by providing this kind of support. So in addition to what it says in the Bible about God being a way maker, that's how I personally know that he's a way maker. So back to the song lyrics. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper. I'm going to skip over the miracle worker part for now and go to the promise keeper part. I know that God is a promise keeper. He spells them out and keeps them all throughout the Bible. And one of those is in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." To be forsaken means that you are abandoned or deserted. And I know how it feels to be abandoned by a human. And I won't get into that. But God never abandons us. And he showed me that I wasn't forsaken by providing for me, not only with my immediate family and closest friends, but he blessed me with an outpouring of love. When I was diagnosed, I started an online journal. I thought it would be therapeutic. And it was also a way for me to keep people informed of how things were going. And over 230 people joined that group on their own free will, where they'd offer encouraging words and prayers and humor. And I also have a huge box of cards that people sent to me while I was going through treatments. And blankets, books, jewelry, flowers, pictures, food. Well, the food is not still in the box. I ate the food, but you get the idea. I was blessed. Plus, I gained a whole new church family, and I joined a morning ladies group who took me right under their wings and covered me in prayer. In church, I learned about the power of corporate prayer. And to this day, I still run into old friends who tell me that they had put my name on their church prayer list when I was going through cancer. And truly, it brings tears to my eyes because I know that God heard all of those prayers, and I know that it was in His will to have me survive. Thank you to all of the churches who put me on their prayer list. It was a blessing. God certainly did not forsake me, and that's just like Him because He promised He wouldn't. So back to the song, Waymaker, Miracle Worker, Promise Keeper. I'm going to go back to that miracle worker part now because I know all about miracles. My first round of chemotherapy and radiation was 5 rounds of chemo and 28 external radiation treatments. And I had 2 oncologists, one for chemo, one for radiation. And my chemo oncologist, Dr. Gorski, she told me, hey, when you're done with all of this stuff, you might need some more chemo. And me, being a doctor, just kidding, I'm not a doctor, I told her that won't be necessary. Understand this. I love Dr. Gorski, but she was my worst nightmare. In fact, when I talk privately about Dr. Gorski, I just call her Gorski because I think it sounds kind of threatening. She was just kind of rough, you know? She was like a stalker because she saw how hard that the chemo was on my kidneys. In fact, a few days after my first chemo, I thought I was going to die. But I didn't. And so for the second round of chemo, due to the kidney issues, she swapped out one type of chemo for another type of chemo in the same family. And that seemed to do a little better for me. I didn't feel like I was dying as much. And so naturally, when I went back for the third round of chemo, I insisted on the stuff that was a little better rather than the stuff that I thought almost killed me. And she refused. She said it went against the protocol. And then she told me, you'll be fine. And I remember sitting there in the chemo chair. You know those chairs, they all look alike. And I was sitting there almost like a pouty 3-year-old. And I was grumbling to my friend Kelly saying, this woman is trying to kill me. She's going to kill me. And Kelly, she just listened. Meanwhile, Gorski, she hunted me down to make sure that I was drinking enough water and Gatorade so that my kidneys would not be further damaged from the chemo. She had not only herself question me, but nurses, technicians, other doctors. They all asked me how much I was drinking. And honestly, I felt like they didn't believe me. And so every time I had an appointment with Gorski, I showed up with my big jug of water. It was a big jug. Because if drinking 100 fluid ounces of water per day didn't work, then Gorski wanted me to have hydration therapy every single day. And I was petrified of needles. So I was okay with doing anything to reduce my chances of needing them. I already had to have so many of them. You see, what I was hoping for, I was hoping the Lord would send me a doctor who would minimize the pain and comfort me. And instead, he gave me the doctor that I needed. And I got through it. And I was so confident after those 5 rounds of chemo and 28 radiation treatments that I wouldn't need any more of it. I certainly didn't want any more. And I'm still petrified of needles. But when I went for my internal radiation treatments, the other oncologist, Dr. Alekhtiar, whose bedside manner was just so caring, opposite of Gorski's personality style, he expressed that he was really hoping that my body would have responded better to the initial treatments. He could see on imaging reports that the 5 rounds of chemo and 28 radiation treatments had barely put a dent in the 3-inch malignant tumor. Sure, it shrunk, but he was hoping that it would have been much, much smaller. You see, I couldn't have surgery because the tumor was too close to vital organs, and doing so would have greatly reduced my quality of life. So when I heard this news, I was devastated. So he asked me if Dr. Gorski had spoken to me about the additional chemo. And the first thought through my mind was, that Gorski, she got to him. She got to him. But I know the Lord intercepted with this man, because he continued to tell me that he thought that I needed additional chemo. And I know that if any other person were to tell me that, including Gorski, especially Gorski herself, I would have fought them tooth and nail and maybe even refused. But the Lord sent him, a renowned oncologist who has not only treated thousands of patients, but who has also contributed decades of research to the specific type of cancer that I had. That aside, all of his accreditations, education, and experience aside, it was his compassion and his gentle tone that told me I needed more chemo. And so I surrendered. I did the additional chemo. And 4 months later, a miracle happened. I found out that I was cancer-free just days before Christmas. Miracles happen every second. I think about all the miracles that were occurring to lead up to that cancer-free diagnosis. And that's how I personally know that God is a miracle worker. Finally, as the song goes, Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. That's what I'm going to talk about now, the light in the darkness. I remember when I learned that my hair would be most likely to fall out. It got to a point where I was shedding so much hair that I knew that I needed to get a buzz job. And so I went to a Great Clips and I told them what I needed and why. And I sat in the chair thinking that I would not be fazed in the least with losing my hair. It honestly was the least of my concerns. But as she got out the electric razor and started shaving the rest of my remaining hair, the tears started rolling as I was looking at my new bald self in the mirror. And then I noticed that she also had tears in her eyes too. And she said, "This is hard for me as well." But soon the tears, they turned into more small talk. And when I went to the counter, I was digging out my bank card to pay, and This is what she told me. She said, "It's on the house." And at that point, I broke down in tears. Because again, I was not working at the time. And there was a part of me that felt like a financial burden. That was just my pride getting in the way, though. The Lord blessed me even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. That's just one example of how He brought light to my darkness by providing for me. Another example, and I felt like I was on the floor during this point of the treatment. I was so weak. But I remember a game I had invented by accident with my 2 youngest nieces. It was called Scare Hair. And I hadn't seen my nieces in months. And they were kind of curious about my baldness. They knew that I was wearing a wig at the time. You see, their grandfather on their other side of the family, he had recently passed away. He was sick and he passed away. And so I could see that it scared these 2 little girls that I was sick too. And so we were on our way home from a movie when we pulled up to the car next to us on the road, and I just happened to make eye contact with the driver. And so I waved and he waved back. And then, for whatever the reason, I don't know what it was. Maybe I was having a hot flash from the radiation-induced menopause. Sorry, gentlemen, if that's TMI. But I whipped off my wig, and then I waved again. And the gentleman in the other vehicle, his face was just completely shocked. He was looking at me like, "Wait a second, you had hair, and now you don't. What is happening?" And the girls in the back seat, they were giggling so hard. They were about 6 and 8 years old. They were just giggling. And my sister was just rolling in laughter like I had never heard before. And I was cracking up. And so naturally, the girls wanted to keep playing this game with people on the road. And by the way, this is my disclaimer. Scare Hair, the game, only works if you're not the passenger. Please do not ever play that game if you are the driver. So, all kidding aside, regardless of how weak that I was feeling at that time, God brought light to the darkness by surrounding me with people who I love unconditionally, and spending time with them certainly brought a lot of joy through the storm. The hard reality with any illness in life is that some people will heal on this side of heaven, while others will heal when they get to heaven. Every day is a gift, and it's an opportunity to be a light for someone else who may need it. I can't tell you how many people told me that I was so strong and such an inspiration to them while I was going through cancer. It was a compliment I did not want to take because I could not take credit for it. It was not me. I didn't feel strong. In fact, I felt the exact opposite. There were days when I couldn't even get out of bed. But He's the strong one. He provided for me. He's the one who gave me strength. He made sure all of my needs were met, and I was singing His praises. He's the one who brought me through it. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Psalm 121 says, "I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Isn't that amazing? He's watching over my entire life. And not just my life, but your life, and your life, and your life, and your life. He's not up there taking breaks. He's not up there taking a vacation or a nap. He's not up there saying, hey, listen, I really want to go binge watch The Chosen tonight. No, he's always present. And so it's obvious to me, he's always working. So my help came from the Lord, and it continues to come for the Lord. And so this brings me to the final thing that I thought God wanted me to share with you. God didn't say, he never said, that there wouldn't be trials in life. Going through cancer is definitely one of them. But he did promise that when we go through trials, that he would walk through them with us. Is anyone here a control freak? Yeah, me too, me too. And I learned going through cancer that I was not in control of this game. Don't get me wrong. I still struggle with the illusion of being in control of something like my schedule. But I know this. Each time I try to take control, God comes along and reminds me who's really in control. My trial brought me closer to him so that I might finally learn this. And so that I would know what it means to fully rely on him. Rather than looking at cancer as this awful thing that exists, I look at it as something that led me back to him. God loved me so much that he wanted me to invite him back into my life and build a personal relationship with him. It's been said that he'll chase us down until our last breath. And I'm sorry that it took a cancer diagnosis for me to wake up. But I'm so grateful to God for putting me into a place where the only thing that I had left to do was to choose to turn back to him, because my life has been so blessed because of that. So, 6 months after I found out that I was cancer-free, this is the best part. I was sitting at the doctor's office in a waiting room, waiting for a scan, and on the other side of the wall, I heard the voice of a lady, and she said, "Is anyone there?" And I waited because I wasn't sure, who she was talking to. And then again, she said, "Somebody. Is anyone there? I need somebody." And I was hooked up to an IV, so I couldn't leave the room, but I said, "I'm here. Are you okay?" And she didn't answer the question. Instead, she asked, "Do you have cancer?" How empowered did I feel to sit on the other side of that wall and say, "Not anymore." And then she continued talking through the wall, telling me that she was just diagnosed and that she has a son and that she doesn't know what to do. And just a year before that, I was her. And now God was putting me into a position to become the healer for her, right? He healed me. Now it's my job to heal others with encouragement and hope. And I still can't quite remember everything that I said to her because I felt like the Holy Spirit just kind of took over that whole situation. But I do know that when I left the room and I walked around the corner, that this young lady came up out of her chair and she said, "Was that you on the other side of the wall?" And I shook my head and she gave me the biggest hug that I've had in a long time. And I hugged her back and I told her that she was brave. Anyone who speaks through a wall in a doctor's office, that's pretty brave. And I told her that she's strong. And I told her that she's in good hands. She's in the best hands. She was a complete stranger, and we bonded instantly over cancer. And as I walked out of there that day, I remember thinking how great God is. He places people in our lives exactly when we need them. And I needed her that day as much as she may have needed me. I was there to offer hope and encouragement, and she was there to remind me of how far the Lord had carried me in just 1 year. So my prayer for all of you who are affected by this disease is that you'll know that you're not alone, and you'll know without a shadow of a doubt that you will not be forsaken no matter how hard it gets. And my prayer is also that you'll know that there's a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, and a light in the darkness who is watching over you constantly. Thank you so much for letting me share my journey of hope.